Hello and welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook. I'm Xalavier Nelson Jr., a creative director and studio head over at Strange Scaffold, an indie studio publishing games, making games like An Airport for Aliens currently run by dogs, and just doing a lot of things all of the time. With all of that on my plate, though, I could not resist talking to Alanah Pearce for the Game Maker's Notebook, a deeply talented writer who has had an extremely varied career across games, media, and beyond. We covered just doing the thing, getting off of social media, finding inspiration in the medium as it exists and the medium as it could be, and bridging the gap between players, developers, media, and the people who cover it all, content creators. So without further ado, thank you so much for listening, and let's jump right in. Hi, Alanah Pearce.
Hi, what's
one
up?
of the most decorated women in gaming, and one of the few people I've met with more irons in the fire than I have.
Yeah, I do have a few irons in the fire. I'm sure you have plenty. What you just told me that you just ate cereal without pouring it into a bowl. Went into your mouth. I don't have that iron in my fire.
I believe Game Maker's Notebook stands for innovation, and my innovation was dry cereal, milk straight from the carton, chew.
Innovative.
So, for those who aren't familiar with your illustrious career or the rad stuff that you're doing now, how would you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Alanah, and I'm a video game writer at Sony Santa Monica Studio, but I'm also a content creator. I have a number of podcasts. One of them is called Video Game Writing 101, where I sit down with different video game writers every month. Voice Acting 101, where I do the same with voice actors. Play, Watch, Listen, which is a games industry podcast with myself, Mike Bithell, Troy Baker, and Austin Wintory, where we attempt to talk about the games industry and then end up talking about life and death and everything in between. I also Twitch stream, all of which is for charity. I cover games on YouTube, try to bridge the sometimes unfortunately hostile connection between game developers and gamers, to try to get some clarity there. Not a lot of people in game development talking candidly about the ins and outs of the industry. So I have a YouTube channel. I am the creator of the Video Game Accessibility Awards, which is a show dedicated to highlighting games that are making strides in accessibility. And I have some comedy podcasts. It's too much stuff, ultimately. The day job is writing at Santa Monica Studio.
And among other things, you were a host over at this year's DICE Awards, right?
I was asked to present an award, which is such an honor. And it was very nice to go after presenting a bunch of awards remotely, where I would dress up my top half and then just wear sweatpants on the bottom to finally get to do some of that stuff in person. It was very nice, and is also how we met.
Yes. I am interested. Was it ever an option on the table to dress up the top half and wear sweatpants below that to sort of bridge the gap between DICE before and DICE now, so we're making a theme of the costumes of the night?
I did still wear sneakers, and my mom was upset. I was wearing this dress for the DICE Awards from a brand called Selkie. They make very princessy dresses. I was like, it's my first one back in person. Let's go all out. And it's a very ridiculous dress. And then I still just wore a pair of Jordans. My mom watched the stream. And she was like, you couldn't have worn a pair of heels. And I was like, I will be comfortable, damn you. Also, it's Vegas. It's this trash hole of a place. So I did what I could.
I love the game design of Las Vegas because I've been a lot of places now. I used to be a military brat, and I've since worked and lived all over the world as well, just for my own profession. But Vegas being a place uniquely designed to interact with you as a player, as someone being played, the sort of antagonistic design of it. I don't want to call it the Elden Ring of places, but that seems like an apt description, right?
When I worked at IGN, I used to have to cover CES, which is a consumer electronics showcase, and it takes over the whole of Vegas and is terrible. And when you're trying to run between appointments, interviews as media between different hotels, all of which are designed to not let you leave because they want you to spend as much money in them as possible. Oh my God, it's the worst. You're trying to get from one chain hotel to another chain hotel to this room where you have to go test out this VR porn, as it were, in the Cosmopolitan. It's so hard to get anywhere It's just such a nightmare. And I feel like DICE, it especially feels like a video game because being back there, so many people I knew just everywhere that I just walk down a hallway and be like, oh, hey. And then someone gives you an NPC line of dialogue like, oh, you're going to be at dinner tonight? And you're like, yep. And you keep walking and none of it feels real. I'm more convinced we live in a simulation every day.
I think COVID has done a lot to further that.
Yep.
I'm really interested. You mentioned this span of experiences you've had across this career, having seen both sides of the game development side of things, for example, as well as the empathy and perspective that gives you and the drive that gives you for advocating for the crossing those boundaries. Where did this all start?
Like my whole career or like which part?
I mean, we could go from birth to death. I'd love to hear the prediction of how you'll die. But yeah, let's start with like where your career and sort of passion for creating things for games began.
Sure. So, my whole life, I've had two passions, and those are writing and video games. Literally, my entire life, those two things. Whenever I get asked the question, what would you be doing if you didn't work in games? It's always writing somewhere else. I would be writing for a magazine or writing for a website or writing books, writing for TV. I would just be writing in some other capacity. My whole life, so I was a kid, I loved video games. It's a passion that always stuck with me, and writing was also there the whole time. So, all throughout school, I was in Extension English. I went to writers' camps. I just loved doing it. And then eventually, I didn't know what to do when I graduated high school. So for a while, I went and studied psychology at university, which actually has really helped in my job now when it comes to like character development. The stuff that I learned in Introduction to Psychology was actually very helpful. But at the time, I was working in a call center because I needed a job, and those are bad. Not a great place to work. Bad vibes. So I was always looking for a way out, and I saw a listing for a volunteer writer on a news website that was for video games, and I had already been doing that on a blog in my spare time anyway. I was already writing about gaming news or doing some light game reviews or features just on my Tumblr, and so I was like, "Whoa, I could put these two things I love together? Oh my god!" And I think it had just never occurred to me. Probably because at the time I had not seen any women doing it. I think that was probably a very big part of it. It didn't make sense to me that was a thing that was for me. I knew people reviewed games. I just think I assumed they were all like sweaty dudes in the room. And so I was like, that's not a thing I could do. But then yeah, I applied. It was just for a volunteer position. And then I was volunteering for several years before I slowly started using all of the money I had at my day job to fly myself to events because I did not live in a city where the games industry was very prominent. So I had to fly to Sydney in Australia to meet people, meet editors, and then I was taking more of this volunteer writing that I was doing, and then started submitting it to people who might actually be able to pay me, who I was meeting at these events and exchanging business cards with or whatever. And then slowly started getting more freelance work, and around the same time I also went to university to study a Bachelor of Mass Communication, majoring in journalism and entertainment writing, because I was like, this is what I want to do. It's done. Obviously, I want to pair these two things. Let's go. And then slowly over a period of 6 years, I think, maybe slightly less, I don't even remember anymore, worked my way up to eventually getting a job at IGN after 5 rejections. I had tried multiple times before I actually got a job there. So worked at IGN for 3 years, and I was hired as toys and culture editor and went on to do a little bit more production work. And then I moved to Rooster Teeth because I realized I'd been in games media for a very long time at that point. I wanted to get more into entertainment writing. So Rooster Teeth does animated stuff. They do movies, they do TV shows. They do a lot more scripted, creative writing content, which is stuff that I've been doing basically my whole life on the side anyway, but ultimately decided that I wanted to take that into the eventual path of writing video games. So I started doing that. At the same time, I started doing like game jams. I was using a different name, so nobody knew it was me, which was convenient. Reached out to some friends who had game studios, asked if I could sit in on their writers' rooms, and then started writing for a few indie games. And that basically built up the portfolio the same way, where I started working for free and then got a little bit of part-time work, and then eventually got a job as a junior writer at Santa Monica Studio, which is where I am now. That's the whole thing.
One of the things I admire most about that journey is I was reading some of the materials and interviews that you've been given before. And apparently in 2015, you wrote a blog post that said you would work at IGN and Rooster Teeth, and
Hmm.
then you made both happen. I
Yeah.
can't think of the last time I've heard of a called shot like that. That would terrify me.
Um, I'm very driven in a way that I also have that same blog. I said that I thought while I was at Rooster Teeth that I thought that I would end up working at Santa Monica Studio. All of these things are very specific goals that I'm like, what do I need to do to get to this place? What are the exact set of skills that I need to make sure that I'm right for it? And obviously, it doesn't work overnight. IGN did reject me 4 or 5 times before I eventually got hired. But that was me repeatedly being like, I got to make myself as employable as possible, which is how me making YouTube content started. It was not out of any passion for being on camera. I much prefer to be a writer. It's all I want to do. I'm so happy that now my day job is just writing and I don't have to be on camera for a living. But I
Except for
was like,
Zoom.
that's fine. And like, I have a lot of fun making YouTube videos and doing the podcast stuff, but it not being my day job, I just always want to write for a living. It means that I can just not do it when I don't feel like it, which I don't know how full-time Twitch streamers exist. Like, I don't know how those people do that. Just unfathomable to me. But yeah, I started making YouTube content because I was like, I recognize IGN seems to want more video. There's more video on their homepage. Need to make sure that I can do that. And I was terrible at first, so I tried to work up a bunch of experience there. I also did volunteer video hosting, so I started out for free. Basically the same way for every single facet, was just like I look, let's look at what this company wants and how do I fit myself into it to make sure I can make it happen. So I think that's kind of how I operate as a person. It's just like I set a really specific long-term goal and then just throw my all at it, and I will never give up, essentially.
And one thing I find fascinating about that is when you're shooting for something very specific, that goal being consistent is pretty incredible as a trend in your career up until now. Because one thing that I found, at least, to be consistent in my own experience is having a goal, either a general or a specific one, and as I work towards it, discovering what I actually love or what matters to me in the process, and that may be changing the
Sure.
ultimate destination. But you said Sony Santa Monica, and you're there.
Yeah. There are like two sides to it. Like, one is the absolute privilege that is knowing the two things I really cared about from a very young age, which is writing and video games. So I had that so early, and people wait their whole lives to figure out what it is that they want to do for a living, and that was like, it was like almost in my DNA. Which is just, I just feel so lucky to have known that for so long. The other one is my mom criticizes me for it. I'm just a little bit robotic. That comes with my particular brand of being neurodivergent. Is I can be a little bit black and white, and that can mean like a very hard set on, this is the goal, here are the steps, here's what I have to do. Um, in a way that, like, you could say, yeah, you really carved that out and you made it happen, but it probably does mean that I have less like flowery enjoyment of trying to figure things out and discover things. Like, to me, I do feel a little bit too robotic sometimes, that I'm so driven on where I want to go that I do have to like fight with my own time to make sure I enjoy things. Like, I have trouble watching TV shows because they don't feel productive to my goals. And this is the thing that I have to just switch off in my brain. So my family recently just visited. First time Australians are allowed to leave Australia since the country shut down, and it was awesome. It was so nice to have them here, and I'm very proud of myself for how good of a job I did of just enjoying being with them, not really working, making sure that I told everybody they kind of had to leave me alone. I was still doing my day job, but they were all like, enjoy the time with your family. It only happens once. Like, that you haven't seen them in ages. So it's a balance that, like, yes, means that I do progress and that I can stick to a goal, but there are downsides to that for sure.
I'm interested. Did your family encourage those two passions, writing and video games?
For sure. There were periods where, when I first started out as a volunteer writer, my family was frustrated because I wasn't getting paid. It took years before I got paid, and I was always a good writer. I always had A pluses in school. I think one of my report cards from when I was a kid said that I was in the top 1% of writers for Australia for my age group, which is very cool because I was so young too. Like, I don't know what I was writing at that point that, that they thought was good. I've read some of my old stuff from when I was a kid, and it is nonsense. But they always knew that it was something that I was good at and probably what I was going to do for a living. So it was frustrating for them to see me not get paid, and I had just no money. My family doesn't have a lot of money, so again, another massive position of privilege that I could talk forever about how hard I worked and everything that I did to make sure I was employable as possible and all that stuff. But ultimately, like, they were lending me money to make sure that I could afford to fly to events when I had $0 in my bank account. So yes, they were always supportive of me playing video games. I think my mom got me into video games, always knew that I loved writing and were very supportive of me doing that. But at the same time, yeah, I think it was difficult for my family when I started out to watch me do so much work for no money and to have $0 to my name for such a long time. And yeah, they were lending me money for flights, for accommodation. Actually, I slept on a lot of people's couches, really, is how I managed to go to so many events. Just a lot of friends really helped me out. And paying them back from the day job that I had, which was actually at EB Games, which I believe is GameStop in the US. That was where I was working at the time until I started to get paid. And my stepdad was the one who understood more than anyone else in my family. He was like, I get it. She's doing all this for free so she can get paid. Otherwise, it'll never happen. And he defended that. But yeah, it was tough for my family to watch. They felt like I was being exploited. And also, like, you know, when they didn't have a lot of money and they were lending me money all the time to go to these events, that was definitely a tough period to get through that I just absolutely could not have done without them. And again, just a massive privilege. I always want to say, you could do what I did. You just have to work really hard and not give up. But like, if you have a family and or like a family you have to support, or you can't afford to get to events, it's probably not possible. Like, that's just the absolute benefit of the situation that I was in, was that they were so willing to help, even though they were clearly annoyed about the fact that I wasn't getting paid.
Even the fact that I'm a game developer and designer now is in large part because my dad always played video games. One of the first pictures that exists of me is sitting on his lap with an unplugged controller. And as much as I want to,
They
also
invented that
point
trick.
to,
It was
yeah.
him.
And then I pass it down, use it on my younger sister, and the tradition goes on. The one thing that stuck with me is, would I have entered this career or discovered my love for it so much later if my dad was not a gamer who was buying games for himself that I then got to play?
Yeah,
We
or
always
if he
had,
didn't support that as like an actual art. And I think that's a reality that a lot of people face when they want to get into games. Like, your dad being supportive or recognizing the value of the work that you make is like a huge help in making those dreams a reality, for sure.
yeah, my mom thought that games were cool too.
Yeah.
And it's neat to hear that you also had a mom who encouraged or got you into video games.
Yeah, yeah. She had my sister and I playing educational games. So like some math game. We played this Mario typing game. Like, she basically, I don't know who introduced it to her or how she figured it out, but found educational games. And so that's how it started. Was we started playing games on PC that were educational. And then my sister and I got, as a demo disc, Age of Empires. And I think my parents also recognized that as, oh, this is teaching you about history. The kids know what Babylon is now. So they were okay with us playing Age of Empires, and then it expanded from there. So it's not like my family knew much about video games. They will still play games with me now. My mom was like huge on the Wii craze. My dad will try to play Mario Kart. Sometimes he'll tell me that I need to call Nintendo and tell them that Rainbow Road is broken. Like, I'll any minute now, Dad. Oh, my doorbell's just gone off.
Do you need to take care of that real quick?
No, it's fine. I have a roommate, I imagine, just got food. So yeah, they're really supportive, and my mom, I know, listens to some of my podcasts, so she has like a strange game literacy for someone who doesn't really play a lot of games. Like, she just has an understanding of what certain games are and when certain games are coming out. And Dad at the moment just keeps asking me to try to find a way to cast him as an Australian dragon. And I'm like, I'll be right on that. As soon as we have a position for an Australian dragon, it is all you, because he really thinks he could do a great job.
Why a dragon specifically?
I have no idea. There's nothing about my cuddly little father that makes me think of a dragon at all, but we won't tell him I said that. He's very tough.
Educational games don't get enough credit for how they introduce people to the medium sometimes have long-standing impacts on people's lives. Is there any of those games from that period that really still sticks in your head?
It sucks because I think I've referenced this a million times, but I don't know what the game's called. I just know there was the math game that my sister and I were playing had this character that would go, "We like our eggs scrambled," but I have no idea what it was or who that character was or what the game was. No concept of it whatsoever. I actually think the first game I ever played was Moto Racer, which just came on my dad's PC. But yeah, the educational games that we got more and more into, I could tell you how they looked, but I don't remember the names of them. It was so long ago, which like again, huge shout out to my mom that was that long ago. She got us started that early. It wasn't when we were teenagers. It was like when I could walk. Like we were already playing games, which worked out pretty great for me in the long run.
One interesting vector of privilege is, yeah, especially if you come from a lower economic class. I had enlisted military dad,
Mhm.
so obviously, uh, the weird, deeply unquestioned income inequality you can see in games. At GDC, you can see people standing in the park right next to each other, who all look generally the same, dress generally the same, and one is a career developer couch surfing, spending their last dime to get to San Francisco, and one is a developer who made $20 million with their first game, and they're just standing right next to each
San
other.
Francisco in general. Like when I worked there at IGN, media does not pay very much. Actually, writing in general does not pay very much. I remember this day where I was walking down the street, and San Francisco has this fog that often rolls in at like 3 p.m. and it's cold and it sucks. um, and it was a little bit rainy, but not so rainy that it was like a massive problem. And my shoes had a hole in them. And I remember that I had to think, can I afford to buy a new pair of shoes? Maybe if I cut back on groceries this week, I can afford the shoes. Which one should I do? Should I get new shoes or should I buy the groceries I need? And then I had this thought that I was like, wait a minute, am I poor? And obviously not poor. Again, speaking of privilege, in the grand scheme of things, no, there are a lot of people who are worse off. But it was very weird to have that when I was working for this company. Uh, at the time, I think I might have even been hosting the Daily Fix, which I was also writing, and that puts you on the banner or the front page of the biggest games media website in the entire world. So everyone just assumes that you have a lot of money.
Yeah, you're
But I,
surrounded by expensive technology. You have all the
yeah,
new games.
and the guy sitting at the desk behind me who founded the site, owned a fucking house in the Bay Area. Like that's a lot of money. And it is a really cool lifestyle. I got to do so much cool travel working at IGN. Though I think everything that happened there, my favorite thing to do at IGN was always interviewing devs and going to studios and making mini documentaries. And I think that's probably the thing that ultimately led me out of games media and into a dev studio. It was like I was like, this is the coolest. I love learning about this. This is my favorite part of this job. So it made a lot of sense that led me out. But just a very weird thing to. We had this deal once where a company had asked for me specifically to host something, and I was told that IGN was getting $120,000 for it, and that I didn't get a cut of that. And I was like, they asked for my name specifically, and I still have to do this on top of my regular job, so I'll be here till 3 a.m. I can't afford a pair of shoes because the Bay Area is so expensive. Not even necessarily that IGN pays that badly. It's just such an expensive place to live. Just a
Huh.
very weird process. And you're right, there is a massive disparity. And I think people still think that I earn a lot more money than I actually do. Um, I don't know how much people think junior video game writers make, but
I think
I
people
think they're wrong.
I think people are very surprised that anything aspirational in terms of career or visibility does not carry with it everything else that they wish that their lives contained. So you started out with this cycle that you mentioned sort of being pervasive throughout your life. You work for free, you get part-time work, you then find a way to get paid for it.
Mhm.
Where did you sort of learn to adopt that cycle? Was it just a natural part of your course in the industry, or was that something that also came from your upbringing?
I think it was probably just required because the first thing I found was volunteer writing. And then I recognized that if I did more volunteer writing, then I would have a resume and then I could submit that resume to Kotaku. I think it just was the only thing that made sense. You can't get paid without a portfolio, right? And I also recognized that I needed to improve. So that I wanted to work with as many editors as I could. I think part of that was me holding myself back. I didn't apply for certain jobs that I probably would have been qualified for because I was like, I'm not good enough yet. I need more experience. I need to learn from more people. Um, I don't feel like I deserve these things yet, even though I realized that a lot of other people were applying for them, even if they didn't feel like they were qualified. Um, so I think, yeah, I don't think it was something that I was ever told. It was just something that like was required, especially because Australia is especially where I'm from in Australia. At least we did make Fruit Ninja in Brisbane, Australia. It's just very isolated from the games industry hub that I wanted to be in, being California in the end. So I sort of
Did
just
you find yourself?
oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. After you,
I don't even remember what I was going to say.
did you find yourself getting more opportunities when you left Australia and moved to the United States?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was immediately working for IGN full time, and they have pretty nasty non-compete stuff. So like, I wasn't allowed to make YouTube videos anymore, even though I had a channel before I joined, and it was part of why they hired me. I wasn't allowed to Twitch stream. Um, but there are a lot of people who don't realize that I even had a career before I worked at IGN. Like, they think I just kind of walked into IGN, but I was doing stuff in Australia for a long time before that. It's obviously how I got the job at IGN. You can't just get a visa with no experience. Quite difficult, turns out. Um, it was more that like I just wanted to be in the games industry, like around people who play video games and able to talk to devs. And that's just a lot more limited in Australia. It certainly exists. The industry's still there, but it's a lot smaller. Australia also has this thing we call tall poppy syndrome, where people in a smaller industry, and I believe this is still sort of an issue. I hope it's gotten better. The minute that somebody like rises up as successful, everybody else needs to take them down. Again, it's called tall poppy syndrome. Very big thing in Australia, where anyone's too successful above the herd, everyone tries to take them down. And that was happening all over the place in the Australian games industry because there were so few people. So it was just a very competitive environment in a way that could sometimes be a little bit nasty for women, I think. Whereas here, I've certainly still had like issues that pertain to sexism in the games industry, but generally a much more mellow time in the US. So in terms of opportunities, it was more that I just really wanted to be in the games industry. I wanted that to be my life, and it is, and it's great. I'm a big fan.
Speaking of like getting into that entry point to where you always wanted to be, you mentioned that one of your first steps was asking to sit in on writers' rooms, and I've never really heard that as a point of exploration for the career before. What inspired that specific angle?
I wanted to know how it worked so that I could learn how to do it. And that was obviously a unique position to me getting into video game writing full time, was that by the point that I wanted to do that, I had already established a very big network of peers, of people that I knew. So I was able to ask a lot of studios if I could do that. And I just signed an NDA and then sat in on their writer's room and took notes, and sometimes had a little bit of input. But it was mostly that I just so badly wanted to know how it worked and what they did, and what it looked like so that I could learn how to do it. I also like virtually every single script book for a video game that exists, I would buy and read over them and just learn how video games get written so that I could practice writing video games, so that I had, samples that pertain to that if I wanted to submit places, so that I could become a better writer. Even if I didn't end up getting a job, I think it was like probably 3 years I had been slyly trying to start writing video games before I actually got the job at Santa Monica Studio, and done just like little bits and pieces here and there. I would have just kept trying and kept doing that until I found that, like, if it had taken me 10 years, I would have just kept doing the same thing, in part because I wanted to be employable, but also like I just really wanted to know how it worked. I'm just so enthusiastic about it. So like even now I do video game writing full time. That is my day job, 9 to 6. But then I still have a podcast where I talk to 2 video game writers every month because I like hearing how they do it and how everybody does it differently. And I just think video game storytelling is very cool, and there's so much to learn. And I think we have a very long way to go, which I see as exciting. We are just, I feel like, in our infancy. The industry's in its infancy in terms of storytelling. There are games that have done incredible work, but I think we just have so much creativity that we can't even imagine yet. And I find it so exciting to think about.
Stepping behind the curtain, what surprised you most about the game's writing process from the outside looking in?
Speaking of the writers' rooms that I joined initially, I think it would probably be just how collaborative it was with other departments. Like your whole narrative team, even your level designers who aren't technically on a narrative team, they'd be design in a lot of cases. I'm technically on the design team at Santa Monica Studio. Um, just how much every different department has input. Like, a writer can write a character bio, and then it gets submitted to a concept artist, and then that whole character bio changes because the concept artist did something so cool that they change an entire backstory. I think I very much expected it to be a little bit more like a TV writer's room, which I had done a little bit of before, and had experience overseeing because of Rooster Teeth, but also I had done a little bit of that at university. Whereas video game writers' rooms are sure, there are a bunch of writers, but then there are all these other departments that influence the story, and everyone comes together, and it's so collaborative. I don't imagine every studio is like that, but I think everyone that I sat in on and Santa Monica Studio are very much like that. And I think it's just so, yeah, so much more collaborative and cooperative and like mutually inspired than I expected. You're just constantly seeing people be impressed by other people's ideas in a way that's just so cool.
Is there anything that you found that you were dead wrong about as soon as you saw the development process?
Most things. Um, like, I had been working at IGN and us had felt that I was in the industry and I was interviewing developers all the time. A lot of my friends were developers, to the extent that I felt like that made my job as a quote unquote journalist a little bit awkward. Like there were too many people that I knew and I had learned too much about the dev side. And I really just learned that it's so weird that we listen to YouTubers or people in games media who have no experience in game development about game development. Like I've been doing a AAA for 2 years and I still am wrong about loads of shit. But it's why did why are people who have no experience in game development at all the ones that are the go-to to listen to about game development? It's so weird. And I had no concept of that when I was in games media. Whereas now I'm like, this person said this thing and they're just super wrong. It's just all wrong. And again, I think I'm still wrong about loads of shit. And it's been very weird to adjust to that, to be like, why did anybody listen to me? Why at any point did anyone listen to me? What? Like it, very strange. I'm surprised all the time. I'm still learning stuff every day. I don't think that will ever end. I'm so frequently just like, wow. And I do wish that there are upsides and downsides, and I get why it doesn't happen, but I do wish that game development was allowed a little bit more transparency to teach people a little bit more about how it works or how things flow. But the industry is just so secretive about that stuff. Again, I kind of get why. There are downsides to oversharing. I think that that's part of what like bit CDPR in the ass was that they were so candid and honest about what they were planning to make that it ended up seeming like they were being dishonest because they couldn't commit to a lot of those things that they had in the ideas process. And that's the way every game works is you have all these ideas and you're like, we're going to make this and we're going to make this. And then the next week someone's like, we actually cut that. And you're like, oh, okay, we're not making that. Good thing we didn't tell the internet, which they just kind of did. But yeah, no, I'm wrong about everything. That's the answer. Wrong about so many goddamn things. It's nuts that anybody has ever listened to me or does listen to me. I'm so sorry.
Before then, you had already started voice acting, right?
I started when I left IGN because I recognized that it would have been kind of a conflict of interest if I were doing it at IGN.
So, how did you, what insight into game development before you started sitting in on writers' rooms, for example, did you get being a voice actor? And how did it change the way you ended up writing for voice material in the future?
Definitely helped. I don't think I'm a very good voice actor, but I love getting to work with different people, and that's the cool thing about it is I'm still allowed to do that while working at Santa Monica Studio. It means I get to work with different teams, and get to see how they write and form characters, and I get to ask questions. Why would I say this way? Who is this to? Why have I said this way? That stuff is very cool, and I feel very lucky to be able to do it. Again, considering I'm not very good, these people have really thrown me a stone to get to work with me, and I'm very thankful for it. It's awesome. I would say that's how I first got an intro to how branching dialogue works. Was seeing a lot of that stuff for Cyberpunk specifically. It was really fascinating to watch how it was laid out. I think the thing that I learned that would be most helpful was direction. Was probably how people direct. That's not something that I have done, but that I hope to at some point be allowed to be in the room when the voice actors are doing their voice acting and like see how they read and see what input I can have on that, because that seems like a very fun thing to be able to collaborate on. So that's definitely just getting to watch directors because they're directing me, I suppose, in those instances is definitely something that I tried to just learn as much as I could from. And like, okay, well, why did you present this scene this way, and what does it mean for this character, and where is their arc, and what's the timing, and really like delving into that. I feel like a number of my voice acting sessions have ended in me interviewing the audio directors, which is very very cool. But yeah, branching dialogue was the big one. I had no concept of how it was laid out or recorded beforehand until I did it, and then I was like, oh wow, that is painful. It's really hard and very messy.
Casting directors and audio directors and voice directors are just the coolest gosh damn people as well.
Totally.
So
I think audio design, I think they're the coolest. Like, okay, concept artists, incredible. Audio design, like the person who gets to decide how the rain is recorded, and it's like they're frying bacon and they recorded it at home, or like you're trying to find something creepy and they go record a friend's baby crying and then reverse it. Like I think that shit is the coolest. Like the stuff that they do is so weird and out of the box, when I feel like what I do is like, sure, it's creative, but it's still very structured in a way. Like writing video games is still very, we need to have this thing for this person. Like it's still like you can still print off a checklist. And maybe that comes from my university background, that I just like in my head, I'm like, the arcs must exist and this must happen. And what about relationships? Whereas I feel like audio design is just like, I don't know, I recorded an engine and sped it up. It's so dope. Like it's just so out of left field. It's so cool. And I definitely don't think I could ever do it. My brain doesn't like think that far out of the box enough. It's rad.
It's improvisational in a way that a lot of development departments don't get to be, because we have to build the entire span of what a world means before we can like make a gun. You have to define what metal is first.
Yep. Physics. You got to think about there's so many rules. Audio design ain't got no rules. It's so cool.
You mentioned that you wrote for some indie games. Is there any that you'd like to like name drop as things that you're especially proud that you wrote for, that you did really good work there?
I would prefer not to.
Totally fine.
Though there's one that will be coming out this year. So there are 3 that are still indie. One that I did on, no, 2 that I did under different names. And one that I am really proud of, but I am going to keep that completely under wraps until maybe like some 10 years down the road, where I'll be like, hey, I read that dialogue you liked, you son of a bitch. And they did like it. Yeah, there is one that's coming out this year that I had to write a fairy tale for that was actually pretty cool, but trying to like keep that on the low, trying to keep it all under wraps. It's a weird thing where I have always felt like writing is mine. Like everything that I write, I don't, I've been writing books my whole life. And I think this came from my dad. When I was a little girl, my dad wrote my sister and I this book called Ruzzy Bee that was about a bumblebee. And he wrote all these songs, and he actually got like the music written and everything. And he had an artist draw him up. Never published. Just this little universe for my sister and I. This little character called Ruzzy Bee that I feel like I know very well, and I could still sing the songs that nobody else has ever heard of. And I don't think dad ever felt a need to publish it. And I think I've always been that way too, is like of all the books I've written or short stories or screenplays or whatever, I've never felt the need to publish any of them. And people are always like, well, you're not a published writer, so you're a writer? Like, yeah, I just don't care about what you think of it. I don't know. I know that's not, I just feel like I don't want to share it all with everyone, because then I feel like it loses some of the enjoyment, is I think what I think of it is like when I'm just doing it and I'm not thinking about what people think of it. For all the personal stuff that I do, but that also applies to some of the games. If like I'm just in a room and I'm just writing with other writers and thinking about making the best possible thing, but I'm not thinking about what anyone's going to think of the line that I wrote individually for the pressure that it has on me, because there is a weird pressure that it has on me. I have a much larger following than your average video game writer. If there's anything that they don't like about God of War Ragnarok, I'm going to get blamed for it, even if I didn't write it. Like, I'm fully aware of that. So I'm like, you don't need to know about it. You can have these podcasts that I do and this stupid YouTube channel and these Twitch streams and all this stuff. I don't feel the need to detail the writing, because then I think it stops being mine. And I'm also just aware that people will try very hard to scrutinize the things that I do. And I'm like, you can, but why would I give you that? My team can scrutinize the things that I do and make me better as a result. Yeah, I just don't have a lot of interest in sharing. I'm sure that will change one day. And I think the day that that will change and I have more of an interest in sharing, what I specifically wrote on something or whatever, is probably when I feel like I have the experience to say, here's what you could learn from this, or this was bad for this reason, or this thing that I did was really good for this reason, and here's how it impacted the project. Whereas right now I'm still in the learning period, so I don't feel like I have anything to teach anyone about video game writing ultimately. Nothing that my peers couldn't do 10 times better than me, which I guess is why I have the video game writing podcast. So I don't feel like it's an insecurity. It is a disinterest. I don't want to give it to the universe. I want it to be mine with the people that I work in the room with. And I hope I can keep it that way. There's also some stuff that I just like have to be cautious about where Sony's concerned, where I have the potential to accidentally make, like, if I were to say I wrote this part of this game, I have the potential to make unintentional news with that, because of the scale of audience or whatever. Again, it's not like it's huge. It's just bigger than your average game developer. And I don't want to take that away from PR or marketing or from anyone else on the dev team. I don't want to make anything about me. So I'd be like, if Sony asks me to do an interview about what I wrote, I would do it. Otherwise, I don't think that I will try to have any input, because I just don't want to accidentally take that spotlight or accidentally make an article and take anything away from the rest of the team ultimately, because it's a lot of people and I don't deserve any of their spotlight. So the writing is private, and I love that for me because my job has been public for so long.
It sounds like it's freeing not to have to attach something to your hashtag brand as well.
Totally. There's stuff that I'm like super proud of, but I'm like, you don't need to know about it. I can be proud of it without anybody being aware of it, and that's okay. My friends know and are proud of me too, and that's all I need. It's more my parents, really, if they're proud that I did good.
I really respect that, especially since social media seems to. One friend related it in a way that I love, which is it feels like everyone is announcing something every day, but that's just because there's so many people. It's actually one person is announcing this one thing, and it took them 4 years to get there, but because it's all flooding in, it feels like this immense pressure to be as productive, as visible.
Yeah, I mean, I have a million problems with social media. It has helped me a lot, and it's a tool that I used. Again, I made sure to build social media followings as part of the be as employable as possible thing. That was definitely part of it. It was like, I recognize this industry cares about that, so I will make sure that I build up these different portfolios and then I have them. So it's certainly something that's helped me, but I spend so little time on Twitter. And whenever people ask me how I get so much done in a day, I think my go-to answers are I don't watch TV and I don't scroll my Twitter timeline. I'll look for maybe 5 minutes a day, if at all. And most of my tweets are funny things I thought of that I put in my drafts for a week. And then I'm like, I haven't tweeted in a bit. There you go. And then I just send it off and I don't read any of the responses. It's just gone. Do what you will with it. And I sometimes will accidentally it can be hard not to quote tweet something that's really negative, and I try to catch myself on that and be like, you don't have to do that. I know that you want to get mad about something, but Twitter can be just a real nasty place for that kind of thing. I try to very much exist without it as much as I possibly can. I think it tricks us into thinking that we're being productive is a big thing, because Twitter is very hostile and very engaging in its hostility. You feel like when you're on Twitter, you are being productive. You feel like you are contributing, like you are. It feels like a job. And I genuinely think Twitter contributes to burnout culture, that everyone feels burnt out because they have this separate job on their phone that's not their day job, that is commanding so much of their attention. And they feel like they see their own metrics. You see your own review card, right? Where you're like, this got this many likes or this many retweets. I did a good job today. You go tell your friend about it the way you would tell your friend, oh, my boss said this nice thing. I just feel like it's so bad. It's just so bad for all of us. I love the games industry bubble on there, and I've learned a lot of really interesting stuff on there. Like there are a lot of really cool dev threads where you can just read over things, and uh, a lot of really creative artists, all that good stuff. There is good stuff on there, but for the most part, I feel like it just funnels us into this hole of thinking we're being productive when we're absolutely not. We're just giving ourselves anxiety.
You mentioned that you don't watch TV either. How does that connect to Twitter and social media and just basically the things that you choose to engage with and consume?
I mentioned that before. This is a flaw and not something I would encourage of anyone, especially because I think that I should be watching more good TV because that's a good way to see more good writing. I have a trouble watching TV because it doesn't feel productive. My issue with TV is that I sit there and I try to watch something and then I think about all of the writing I could be doing or the YouTube video I could be making or the Twitch stream I could be doing, which goes back to the capitalism problem of always having to create to feel worthwhile, uh, whether people see it or not. So I have a lot of trouble with TV because I feel like I'm just sitting and staring at something. So I generally can't. I will only watch TV if it's like social. So if friends are watching something and we're watching it together, then I'll do it. Or if I'm doing something else at the same time. So I often do a lot of writing while watching TV. It's not an anti TV. It is. I just can't sit. I will end up just feeling antsy because I feel like I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting on a couch. Whereas video games, I don't have that problem at all. I feel like I'm being very productive because I'm learning about game design or I'm criticizing something or I'm, paying attention to what they've done and what I could learn from that, or because it literally feels productive and that you're solving problems. So TV just feels too passive to me. And I wish I could get over that. I wish I could just sit down and watch TV and not feel like I have to do something at all times, but I haven't figured that out yet. One day.
Is there particular inspiration points like other mediums that you really pull from for like, oh man, this is great writing that inspires me for whatever work I'm going to do in the future?
TV totally can. Like, what's it called? Deadwood. When I watched that, I was like, damn, that is how you do a monologue with action. Because they have so many monologues in that show where people aren't just standing or sitting or staring, which is something that I will occasionally read, like beginner. Currently mentoring 5 writers, and I will occasionally read like an entry to a screenplay. And my number one thing that pops up is there is no action in any of these scenes. You went from one scene with 2 people sitting at a cafe, from a scene to 2 people sitting on their living room couch, to a scene to 2 people laying in bed. It's always just 2 people talking while sitting, no action. And I don't know if like writing video games made me think about action orientation more often, but I think like yeah, watching shows that do that well, that deliver a good character monologue while also having the character do something, and that pairing just makes me think, how can video games do a better job of that? Like of taking away the cutscene and giving players more control over what they're doing while a tidbit of story is being told. And I think that's a challenge that I am very passionate about and very interested in, is less cutscenes, more gameplay without losing the narrative impact, without having the Half-Life effect of player character just jumping around while you're being delivered very important lore information and how silly that is. Um, so I think a lot of film and TV do a really good job of that. I also feel like I learn very well from things that I don't think are good. And I sit there and I think about why I didn't think the writing was good, what I thought was bad about the writing, and how to avoid those kinds of pitfalls or tropes. Um, yeah, whenever I do watch a movie, I try to really assess what I like about it. Like I only just saw The Godfather 2 years ago, and I assumed it wouldn't be that good. Surely it couldn't be that good. This is an old movie, overhyped. Sure, yeah, it's one of the greatest. And then I was like, oh my god, everything you've done here is incredible. And then I just like try to talk to people about it afterwards and be like, here's why I thought this character development was incredible, and just try to pick apart things to see like what I think they did well and what I can learn from them all the time. And I can from film and TV, and I wish I had it in me to sit through The Sopranos. I wish I could do it. I know that I should. I know everyone says it's incredible. Same as The Wire. I know I should do it, but it's so hard for me to like. Maybe if I'm there with a notebook taking notes of what they do that I think is good, then I'll be able to do it. But I just have so much trouble sitting idle. It sucks.
I have some of the same difficulty with games, to be honest,
Hmm.
especially open world games. I adore. It's probably my favorite genre of games is something that utilizes an open world in an interesting way. Uh, but there's in most titles I play, there's a point like 3 to 8 hours in where I feel that what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the experience is much in the same vein
Sure.
of what I've seen already.
So
And as
then
soon
what
as
do
I
you
hit
think
that point,
makes
my
a good open world?
just this applies to linear games as well. It's my curse. I buy
Mhm.
games. I'm excited about them. I want to support developers, and then I'm in for 2 hours, and I have felt a sense of what the rest of the story is
You're right.
communicating and what the rest of the mechanics are doing.
Yeah, you're totally right. That was the thing when I was doing game reviews that, you finish the game, but I could play 5 hours and be like, I could write the review now. And sometimes I would write half the draft and then nothing would really change by the end. Like, you're 100% right that that's a thing that you can really get a feel of what something is very early on. The stopping is, I don't have a problem with that because I think I get hooked on completion because, again, that feels productive. So, like, finish the quest, get the achievement, get the trophy. That is enough to keep me going. I get very obsessed when I get into a game. It's like it's all I'll think about for 2 weeks, which a lot of us do that.
My brain haunts me. I get existential, and I'm like, am I going to sit here with the controller and just hit the X button? Uh,
MMOs, man. Like, I used to get very addicted to MMOs. Guild Wars 2 was my worst. I also got very into Neverwinter, and so now I can't touch them because I know they're not fun. MMOs aren't fun. You are just clicking.
but
Okay?
have you tried the critically acclaimed
No,
trial for?
I don't want to do it. All my friends talk to me about Final Fantasy, and I'm like, I know what will happen to my life, which is that it's all I want to do. Even though I, in my head, I'm like, when you play an MMO, you just click a button. It's all you're just clicking a button and getting cool armor, and then doing more clicking. I don't want to do it, but I get so addicted to them because that those levels come so fast that it's like that progression is just so hard to put down, and I can't. No, I just can't play MMOs anymore. It's like crack. Can't do it.
One interesting thing I hear about in your creative process is how much you have specifically prioritized working around the way your brain works. And it seems like you intentionally note how your brain works and reacts to different situations. And that seems like, for a lot of the creators I speak to, critical to someone being both successful and happy with their success or method of process.
That makes sense. Yeah. I am on the autism spectrum, and I think that like in a way, in a few ways, is a superpower, and that I do have like a lot of understanding of like I said, I can be very black and white about what I want and what I need, and I am very happy. And like it always feels weird. Like the whole pandemic, people ask me how I was, and I'm always happy somehow. Generally, always I'm good, and I think that comes from knowing myself very well, probably, even though it's very strange. Like I was living in a studio apartment with no windows, no balcony, completely by myself for 8 months. I didn't look at a single person in the eyes for 3 months, and I was still like, I'm good. Yeah, I'm fine. It's all right. Very introverted though too. Um, and yeah, I think that's probably also just in a lot of cases something that comes with age. People have to figure out. But I think if you want to survive as a creative, imposter syndrome is a huge thing that everyone in any creative field really suffers with. You have to come to terms with reassuring yourself and making sure that the risks you take are worthwhile. And I think my number one accomplishment has been that I don't need a lot of assurance outside from wanting to learn. So I'm fine with failing and I'm fine with being bad at things as long as I can learn, and figuring out that that was what motivated me more than being perceived as successful or more than people awarding me things or accolades. It was just, am I learning by doing this? Am I learning? And that's why I would never want to go a full time YouTuber or a full time Twitch streamer, even though those avenues would probably be a lot more profitable for me. Is then I can't work with a group of people who are way fucking smarter than me that I can learn from. So it doesn't appeal to me. Like working in AAA development and having all of these people who are just experts at what they do, who know so much more than you ever could about that thing because they're at the top of their field, that they're just geniuses on this one specific thing, and that I can just ask them about it. Just what? Like, how is that allowed? It's amazing. And it's so inspiring. So I think that I may have figured it out as a teenager. I don't really know. But it's definitely something that I think has helped me more than anything else, is that I'm not afraid to fail. I'm not afraid of people thinking something I've done is bad. as long as I'm learning and that I'm growing from things. And, I got criticized for leaving jobs too soon. I don't really feel like I did. I left IGN after 3 years and Rooster Teeth after 3 years. It doesn't feel like that's too soon in your 20s. But I got a lot of criticism for like job hopping. And I was like, but I didn't have anything else to learn. Why would I stay? I don't understand why you would stay at a company if you don't have any growth left. And I didn't. I was like, I definitely don't have anything to learn. And it's definitely kept me on track and kept me happy and kept me satisfied as a creative, so that I don't really struggle with the imposter syndrome or um, feeling not good enough. Is because it's just I'm not good, and that's okay because everyone around me is good, and I will be better as a result of being with them. The biggest struggle that I do have is being so acutely aware of how obsessed I've become with productivity and my value being tied to being productive for myself, not from what other people think of that output. I'm hoping that in my 30s I figure that out. Maybe at some point I'll figure out how to chill out. I don't know how to do that. I'm working on it.
One thing I don't want the interview to end without addressing is that one of your key areas of advocacy is attempting to bridge the gap of understanding between players and creatives, especially in video games. Where do you think that desire came from, and how do you pursue that advocacy?
Um, I'm in a unique position there where, like I said, I was in media and I started a YouTube channel to get better on camera because I recognized as a very nerdy writer that I was terrible on camera and that the industry wanted it for people who are full time. So I started making YouTube videos and doing that while throughout my entire media career, where I was learning more developers and I was hearing things that just were so at odds. I think it might have even been sparked from I was at this party once, right? And I was writing for an Australian magazine. And so the party was like the media side of media and game developers. And a certain game developer was complaining about YouTubers. And I was like, I have a YouTube channel. And he was like, not you, Alanah. You're one of the good ones. And I didn't take that as a compliment. I took that as oh, there's a problem here. There is something that is wrong with all of these different facets of the games industry and how they communicate with one another. And it is hard trying to make YouTube content where I do try to be like, hey, from the developer's perspective, I have this person who worked on this game. Here's what they would say about this. It is hard because the YouTube audience doesn't actually want to hear most of it. They want to hear fuck the publisher, they're evil. And in a lot of cases, that's just not true. So I think it comes from being all three of those things for a long time, or two of them at least, which was games media and a YouTuber, which even those two hate each other. And being like at YouTuber parties and then at games media parties and hearing those two worlds and being like, wow, I'm both of these. And you both think of each other incorrectly. And then you add development to that and it's just gotten more extreme. So again, it's tough. It is a little tough because people don't want it, which means that I can never be particularly successful as a content creator. Thankfully, that's not the day job. So it's not what I'm really after. But like, people do want to hear the angry stuff, and I just try to be the voice to cut through that. My goal with content creation has always been be either positive, informative, or entertaining. And there are a lot of YouTubers out there who make things that are focused on being angry or negative because it gets a lot more views. I don't feel like I serve any purpose by doing that. So I don't cover news, even if it's like very trending news that everybody would want me to cover, unless I have something to say that I haven't seen other people already say, or I have a misconception that I feel like I can correct or something like that. So yeah, I think that approach just came from recognizing the uniqueness of the position that I'm in. I don't know of anyone else who works in AAA game development who also has a YouTube channel where they talk about games editorially to the scale that I do. I'm sure there are people, but I'm just in a very unique position, and I try to use that position carefully where possible to like try to bridge this nasty gap of these three things disagreeing with each other in ways that it's like games are so cool. Like, could we like there are things that billion-dollar companies do that I don't agree with for sure. But video games as a whole is so cool. Gamers are awesome. The people who make games are awesome. The people who cover games are awesome. Every part of it is why we're all so passionate. Like the hostility comes from people really, really caring about the industry, and that's fucking cool. There's a lot of industries where nobody's passionate because nobody cares. I don't think anyone's screaming about insurance companies on YouTube. Not to the extent that gamers are about game delays. And one of those things is a lot more impactful than the other. So it's a testament to the industry, but it's also something that I don't know. I just try to use the position that I am in and recognize the uniqueness of it to try to bridge that gap however I can. But again, talking to a lot of game devs on YouTube is just like such a privilege. It means I get to talk to people and you'll get to learn, and that's the whole thing.
One big thing that I've found to be a giant separator is also just the sort of lack of vocabulary. Often, the specific things that developers care about are things that players have never heard of. So, like everyone's talking about ray tracing. I've been in a lot of rooms where ray tracing isn't even really an idea or like necessarily on the radar. The terms being bandied about are like deferred and forward rendering, which
Yeah,
I was director level before I'd ever knew what those things were.
very different jargon for sure. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that people don't understand. Like the biggest one that you can't say on YouTube is that FIFA is hard to make. Like they just think it's literally recycled every year. And I'm like, I know people who work on FIFA. That is not true. But I don't know how to tell them that because they're like, no, it's garbage. Not that it's called FIFA anymore. Sorry, EA Sports FC. And
Have to use the
that's
right brand.
yes. You don't want to get sued by FIFA. Um, yeah, it is tough the misalignments there. And I think one thing that always gets me is we like the people on dev teams really just want to make good stuff. They just really want to make good stuff that people will like, and it's odd that sometimes that can be lost by the audience or be assumed not to be true by the audience. And yeah, the jargon stuff again. I wish that the games industry could have a little bit more transparency and talk a little bit more about how things work, but I just don't know how that applies when the current marketing cycle is just kind of nasty. That if something doesn't happen, it's not a reality of development; it's a failure. It's tough. I don't know. Maybe I can figure out a way to try to bridge that gap of communication somehow myself. I just don't know how to do it.
Do you see things improving?
No. I don't think things are actively improving. I don't think they're getting worse though. So that's good. Like I just the last video I uploaded on my channel was about Starfield being delayed and all these people saying why don't they just not announce release dates until games are ready, and I tried to just be like, okay, here's the reason that doesn't happen. In a lot of cases it's the stock market. You need to have games in certain quarters. They have to marketing teams have to account for how long their marketing cycle is going to be and what dates they're planning to do certain things. It's so much more complicated than just the gamer. And I think like it's so simple to be like, why don't they just only announce the release date a month beforehand? But then you think of all of the teams that screws over. It can also even be a challenge internally. Like having a release date is important for dev teams to know when they're going to get a break, to know when the cycle is going to end and when they are going to stop working on the project and when they can wash their hands of it. Like all of that factors into it, and it's something that I feel like, yeah, just the reaction to Starfield was so much just, well, they lied about the release date. To part of that, the other point I made in the video was like they didn't. It's just it is virtually impossible to tell you when something is going to come out for sure. Game development changes every second. Like games are constantly changing so much more than you would think all the time. It's a nice idealized projection when you get a release date early, but it's so much more difficult than I think anyone outside of the industry understands. Like it seems so simple to say, just don't announce it till you're ready. Well, they thought they were ready, then they weren't. It's just complicated.
Yeah, I cannot think of a single developer who delayed because they knew that there was because they were like, I want to get people's hopes up. They want to finish that game too.
Or like knew that they were wrong about a release date when they announced it. Like they want to be right. They don't want to be wrong. They want to be right for a bunch of reasons. It's just very, very, very complicated. And yeah, I don't know. I just wish devs could speak a little bit more candidly, and that maybe we could figure out a way to get rid of some of that hostility that exists in that cycle of those three pillars, the three estates of video games. But it is really complicated.
You mentioned that game storytelling is still in its infancy and we have so much further to go. Is there anything that's really exciting you about game narrative right now or that you've played recently?
I thought Weird West was very cool. Made by someone who may effectively be like a grandfather of immersive sim, one of the founders of Arcane. Um, and I think that that's a thing that does really pique my interest uh, in terms of narrative storytelling or narrative design. Even is probably like there is probably a future where every game is an immersive sim, in just a different way. Every game is an immersive sim insofar as you fully do have a lot of control over everything that you're doing. You aren't beholden to chasing a character because uh, that's what the cutscene told you to do. That you could kill someone on the spot, and that the game will figure out a way to like AI adapt as a response to that. And I think that that's. I would like to see games. I don't want to get rid of the cutscenes. I don't want to get rid of a game like The Last of Us. I love those. I want those to exist as well. But I think that there's just a lot of potential to use the tech more that we haven't tapped into. Like, could we be using the cloud? Could we be using better AI to contribute to storytelling? What potential do we have to use the fact that these are video games to tell video game stories? And I just, again, I feel like we're only limited by the tech we have invented thus far, and I think we have a long way to go, which is very exciting.
It's been interesting to see how companies considering or being confronted with the consequences of not considering accessibility have, in many unusual and unexpected ways, advanced several pieces of our medium. I feel
Yeah.
like our game design is better than ever. Our storytelling is better than ever because we are thinking about accessibility. And accessibility is obviously something that's a huge part of your career with things like the Accessibility Awards. Where are your thoughts on game development as far as accessibility goes, and how, having seen multiple sides of having seen the multiple estates of games, what do you think about as far as the future of what accessibility holds for the industry?
So accessibility right now is like sort of dog shit. Unfortunately, I created the Video Game Accessibility Awards because my agenda was to give a shining award to studios so that more studios would go, I can win an award. We should look into this, or the publishers at least, so that more people would feel compelled to add accessibility options to their games. And the thing about accessibility is that it really is just more options in terms of design. Like it really just there's just no downside. It makes every game more customizable for every single player. Everyone has more options. There are some games that have done incredible jobs. The Last of Us Part 2, just such enormous strides for accessibility. Currently the most accessible game ever made, in my opinion. It's not really possible to make a game that is 100% accessible to everybody because you don't have the ability to foresee every single accessibility need of every human on the planet, right? But there's just no downside. And the more that we delve into it and the more that we add accessibility options, again, you really are just adding customizable options. And why would you not have the most customizable game available to every player? Because again, it's a video game, it's not a movie. They should be able to tailor it to exactly how they want to play. There are a lot of conversations that are like, oh, it'd ruin Elden Ring if you did this thing. But my argument would always be, okay, if you care about playing Elden Ring in the hardest way possible, then just do that. Just don't use the options. Other people can. It's not a problem. Like if you're in support of mods, it's a very similar thing. A lot of games don't even try. And I think the one thing that, if we're talking about the three estates, which is very cheesy, is right now, no studios are really announcing their accessibility options ahead of time. And I think that media should be asking for that in interviews more, because there are a lot of gamers out there who get very excited about something because it looks cool from the trailers that they've seen. And then turns out they can't even play it. I find that to be extremely unfair. Like we should be announcing accessibility options much further ahead of time. Of course, this is another thing in terms of game development that changes and evolves as it goes on, but more transparency so people can actually know if they can play something before they get their hopes up, before they put their pre-order in. Potentially, sometimes they even buy something, spend $60, and then find out they can't play it. That's heartbreaking. I had an experience with Battletoads. I bring this up probably more than anything because my particular accessibility issue is that I have tendonitis in both my wrists, so I can't do any rapid button mashing. Much prefer a hold or a slower tap. I have trouble with some QTs if it's very fast. I basically just won't be able to play the game for very long. My wrists will hurt. I'll have to put ice on them. It's painful. And I expected Battletoads to be accessible because the week before Xbox had just announced like new accessibility guidelines. And it wasn't at all. It was so button mashy that I was in so much pain playing it. And I was just like, I wish I had known ahead of time before I got excited about this that I wouldn't be able to play it for more than like 20 minutes at a time. It's just such a bummer. So that's the thing I would like to see media ask for more, but also see studios be more transparent about is like, if you can give me a trailer showing me the newest gameplay, then you can also write me a blog post telling me the accessibility options so that my friend who's blind knows if he can play the game or not. It's not that hard. It's not that hard.
Have you seen the accessibility awards have the impact that you were hoping it would have?
Hard to say. We've only done 2 years so far. And I do know that any of the studios that have won, their speeches are so heartfelt that I imagine those people and those studios, you know how people in the industry just move constantly, right? Like no one is really at any one studio for a long time. I do imagine those people who worked on the things that we've awarded thus far will take that with them forever and will advocate for that the entire rest of their careers. Like that is something that I do believe has happened. So that's awesome. We'll take that. That's the best. Um, and people have definitely taken notice who wouldn't have previously. It's sort of hard to say though. I like to think so. I hope so. A big part of the show is also trying to be informative, teach people why these things matter and what certain accessibility options do. So, if we get anyone to watch it, then they work in game dev and they walk away. They can be like, "Hey, we should do this because this thing." That's the goal. So it's kind of hard to say if it's tangibly changed anything, but I sure hope so. That's the whole point. So I really hope so.
So we're coming to the end of the interview. Is there anything in terms of topic that you haven't discussed yet that you are passionate about and you'd like to cover?
Just like still would really like people to know about the situation with you and the cereal before we started recording. I feel like more people should know about this. That you put cereal in your mouth and then you put milk in your mouth and then you ate it like it was a bowl of cereal. Um, I'm pretty passionate about that right now. That's fucked up.
It's fucked up, and it's been one of those weeks.
It sure has. No, I don't really have anything. Any closing thoughts? Anytime that I talk to people about my career, my big things are just do it. Do the thing, even if it's going to be bad. If you want to be a writer, just write and keep writing and write more. I am interested in getting into some film stuff on the side. So I made a short film and it wasn't very good and it was very restricted. But that's fine. I did it and I learned a lot. So now the next time that I make one, I have a lot more knowledge going into it. Turns out I'm really bad at color grading. That's a good thing to know. Next time I get somebody else to do it, like a lot of that stuff that like I wouldn't have known if I didn't just fucking do it. So do the thing is the big tip. Second, spend less time on social media. I promise you're not being as productive as you think you are. Please spend less time on social media. It's killing you. And I think the third is this probably doesn't apply to this podcast, but a lot of people try to find success in the games industry by forcing, like being like, oh, I want to be a game reviewer despite having no interest in writing. I think it's a lot easier if you figure out the thing that you're good at and find the job that caters to the skills that you already have, because that does exist. If you're a good artist, you could work on a graphic design team at IGN. Like there are so many jobs, engineers, accountants, legal, so many departments that aren't just the things that are public facing that seem fancy, that are much more realistic avenues for you to get into the games industry based on the experience and the skills that you actually have. But again, I don't know that that necessarily applies to this podcast particularly.
I love your specific advocacy about, or rather, statements around just do the thing, because it's one of the things that kills me most about game dev careers being so short. Our most legendary directors, writers, authors, musicians get that way off of usually decades of invisible work, and then they
Yeah.
explode, or you see them grow in these really tangible ways between releases. Martin Scorsese has tons of movies that we don't talk about as regularly as The Godfathers or whatever else. And you're lucky if you see a game developer who has released 3 things in a row where you can see their voice.
Yeah,
It
true.
kills me.
Yeah. It's a tough industry.
Tough industry, but there is, I believe, because of work you're doing, among other things, hope for the future. So for when you do want to be perceived, where can people find you, support your work, what you're doing next?
I'm at Charizard on all social media. It's my name in the middle of Charizard. You won't be able to spell it, and that's okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.